Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This will summarize chapter 17. We are nearing the end of chapter 17, and we only have two more sections: Dhanam, charity, or giving, and the meaning of the mantra Om Tatsat. Because they are short, it has been thought to use the rest of this time to summarize the entire chapter 17. Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yogaha, the Threefold Faith. Again, chapter 13 to 15 was Jnana Yoga, the science of consciousness, the knowledge that reveals the science of consciousness. It has the power to shift the identity from who one thought they were, which is a small, limited individual, to the whole. And Jnana Yoga has many ways to show this to the ready devotee. One of the ways is by starting out with the highest, which is Satchit, existence awareness. And then we say that this existence awareness has the power, inherent power of, as the scriptures call it, Maya, which when and once wielded upon, it individuates this one consciousness, awareness, into infinite forms, each form for the sake of individuating it from other forms. An individual creates names. Therefore, we call it names and forms. And each name and form has a wonderfully interconnected web with all other names and forms. Nothing is out of alignment, out of function. Everything has a wonderful order, connected, working together in perfect harmony, in perfect unison. Whether we recognize that order, that harmony or not, that is not the fault of the order, that is the fault of the observer for not having the real capacity of sight called Brahma Vidya, through which once looked at this world, this order, one can start to recognize the harmony that is all throughout. Once this Maya individuates names and forms, one of those names and forms, being infinite in number, is this very jiva that is now listening to these words, not the jiva tomorrow, not the jiva yesterday, but the very mechanism that is listening to these words right now, which is a complex mechanism consisting of the three bodies or the five sheaths. Each sheath is, as we said earlier, assigned for a certain purpose, a certain function, which has a interconnected purpose with all of the other sheaths. And why are these sheaths there? Why are these three bodies there? They are there because the jiva, being one of the infinite forms in this universe, finds themselves, due to ignorance, thinking they are none other than a collection of samskaras. And what are samskaras other than? Habits. Habits that make us think and emote towards this world of names and forms, which too is a product of Sat, Chit, and Maya working together. And so this individual, since time immemorial, this individual called the jiva, has always thought that I am nothing but this limited form, small name with a small life. And so the five sheaths, the five koshas, are designed so that these beginningless samskaras assigned to each individual can express through a vehicle, an instrument. And therefore the instrument is created also being none other than one more name and form. And so the jiva has like this thought, I am a collection of these habits, a collection of these unconscious impulses. And for that reason, I have a need to express them, to fulfill them. How so? By engaging with other names and forms, which too are none other than this Maya, individuating this one existence consciousness, this one reality into apparent Dvaita. So then the jiva gets entangled in what we call samsara. What is samsara? Nothing but the need to become, the need to change emotionally, change intellectually. Therefore, the jiva, since the beginning, has only been ever trying to change oneself, wearing this suit, improve oneself, become something better, become a different name and form. In other words, the journey has been transforming oneself from names and forms to names and forms. Never has it arisen, even once, to this jiva that there is something other than these names and forms. There is one reality from which these names and forms come. And so the jiva needs a certain maturity, a certain preparation to even start to question, to even start to look at one's endless pursuit of desires, if there is something behind them, if they are really worth the pursuit. This maturity comes through the course of time, through what we call the jiva's punyam, the punyam coming through the jiva's proper conduct in this world. And so this samsara has kept the jiva ignorant. For this reason, for the jiva to come out of this mundane existence of limitation of names and forms, this existence of limitation from beginning to end, every life, the jiva has to prepare oneself, has to mature oneself, just like if the mommy or daddy tells the child about the basic principle of money, how money works, the child at a certain age will not listen. They will instead ask for toys, cars, their dolls, because that is more appealing at that age. Similarly, the jiva wants to continue playing with literally toy cars in the world, except they are powered by petrol, and dolls, trophy wives. Preparation is harder than self-knowledge. In fact, out of this entire course called the Bhagavad Gita, preparation is by far the hardest and takes the longest. The self-knowledge comes naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously, when the listener, when the jiva is sufficiently prepared. So we are not concerned about so much of self-knowledge taking place, that is moksha, that is completely out of one's hands, other than the only principle that an individual can do is listen, contemplate, and apply the suggestions per the Gita. There is also Ishvara Prasadaha, Ishvara's grace. And Ishvara's grace cannot be purchased through money. It has to be earned. How is Ishvara's grace earned? It is earned by complying with that order, which is none other than Ishvara's. We call that dharmic living, Daivi Sampat. Being out of alignment with that order, one gains not Ishvara Prasadaha. Therefore, even if one has an interest in self-knowledge, it's simply either, number one, will not be relevant right now. The person will listen in class for some time, for a few sessions, and I will say, it is not relevant to myself. I just have a child coming. My family's coming over. I'm buying a house. You don't understand my position. I have duties to take care of. In other words, no matter how much one is shown, they will simply find it irrelevant to their course of life. Even if someone does listen all the way and they're interested, without the preparation, this knowledge will not stick. It will only stick as long as the honeymoon. The honeymoon feels real. It feels absolutely convincing. I'm sure you've already felt that. In the honeymoon, one thinks it's going to last forever, and one is almost on top of the world. They're even beyond the gurus. They're beyond the scriptures. They think, I have done it and I am there. Within 1 year or 2 years, 3 years tops, this honeymoon effect has gone. So has all of their wonder that came along with it. The samskaras come back. The knowledge is slowly forgotten. It cannot be held. Therefore, if the preparation is not there, number one, it will not stick. Even though it's listened to, it will go away within 1 or 2 years, 3 years tops. That is because the person was not prepared, or it will not be relevant. Hence, the justification will come in and make up a good reason that will even be convincing to the teacher. The teacher will probably say, I understand. Off goes the individual to their life. And so chapters 16 and 17 are about this very preparation. We use different names throughout the Vedas. Tattva Bodha, Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampattihi. Chapter 16, Daiva Sampat, that means divine virtues. Chapter 17, we call this mind preparation. For simple words, Satwik state of mind. Therefore, without having to remember all of these fancy Sanskrit words, just think a Satwik state of mind. A state of mind that is virtuous, mature, listens, contemplative, finds itself wanting to do what is right, even if no one's watching, is calm, a state of mind that naturally feels attracted and enjoys following what is right, that is the divine virtues. And so this preparation is what chapters 16 and 17 has brought forth. Should 13, 14, and 15, that is self-knowledge, should it not have taken place properly. So again, we can see Krishna has provided a wonderful order by which to follow. Even when this course ends, this is the order to follow. Self-knowledge is there with the Daiva Sampat, or the Sattvik state of mind. Then we began chapter 17, verse 1 to 6. Arjuna has asked the question to Krishna on the basis of the last verse from chapter 16. The last verse, Krishna stated, to live a successful life, past all of the systems that are available on the market, one absolutely needs to resort to the scriptures, because the scriptures are the word of all knowledge, all power. Following a system of one individual, even though one is following all knowledge, all power, it is partial. Therefore, we resort to that knowledge which is full, like the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, having heard the last verse of chapter 16, then asked Krishna, okay, if we need the scriptures, then what about those who are not literate in the scriptures? For example, they do not know the basic symbolism of festivals, or even the devatas. What does the rat stand for? When we look at Ganapati, Krishna, of course, will answer and say, depends on the faith of the person. If the person is a Raja Guna dominant person, then they will look at that rat as a competitor to squash, to sit on. If that Devata, that Ganapati Devata, is beholding a Sattvik person, then they will look at that rat as those to take care of. Those who are lower than me, I am to take care of them. Even though I can sit on them in one instant, I am still looking at them and caring for them, no different than anyone else, because they too are part of the grand order. Like this, Krishna has shown, depending on the faith of the person, they will interpret the devatas and the festivals as such. For example, Navaratri, even though it is a well-celebrated festival, why do we start by worshipping Durga for 3 days, following by Lakshmi and then Saraswati? And then why do we have Vijayadashami on the 10th day? What does all this mean? This is called scriptural illiteracy. The festivals are there, and yet I do not know that the entire festival, Navaratri, is a depiction of how the entire journey from ignorance to self-knowledge takes place. How does it take place? It starts with 3 days worship of Mahishasuramardini, the great buffalo destroyer, in other words, Durga. What does Durga represent? Destroyer of the tamaguna tendencies, destroyer of asura sampat, all of those tendencies which pull us down, that are dark and incorrect and false in nature. Therefore, we first start to worship Durga. We need the help of the Devata to take care of our ignorant notions, which are clouded by tamaguna. 3 days in real life, this transforms to either 3 years or 30 years of destroying these asuric qualities. Once these asuric qualities, by the help of Durga, have been addressed, we move on to Lakshmi. Lakshmi represents often wealth. However, Lakshmi is worshipping and acquiring those qualities which, once acquired, we are able to gain not only materialistic wealth, but also spiritual wealth, which is why Lakshmi is associated to wealth. In other words, by worshiping Lakshmi, I am acquiring Daivi Sampat, divine virtues, which, once assimilated and practiced and lived in the real world, the charm, the success that comes out of that, not only does it bring materialistic success, which we all need, a roof over our house, to sit down in comfort, but also, once that is there, we're able to pick up a book or come to a class and gain what we call spiritual wealth, Daivi Sampat. Therefore, once the tamaguna have been destroyed for 3 years and the divine virtues have been acquired for the next 3 years or 30 years, whichever way we look at it, depends on the preparation of the mind. Finally, we move on to Saraswati, who represents Brahma Vidya specifically. Once the Brahma Vidya has been assimilated, then on the 10th day, we have Vijayadashami, the celebration of the conquering of the mind, which has since time immemorial been under the spell of this Avarana Shakti by Maya, what we call the veiling power. Owing to its individuation, it hides to create differences. It hides everything about Allison in order to reveal Andre. It hides everything about Yasothe in order to reveal Julie. It hides everything about David to reveal Rani. In other words, if it is A, it is not B. If it is B, it is not C. If it is C, it's not D. And yet, all of those forms and names enjoy the one existence, which is existence awareness. Just like if I were to, behind me, write on the blackboard, why do they call it the blackboard? That is a big question. It's a whiteboard. ABC. ABC has different names and forms. Of course it does. And yet ABC now start to fight over each other. A is better than B. No, B is better than C. No, C is the greatest. And yet they all forgot. They all belong to the one ink. The one ink because of which they all exist. Just like that, Saraswati, once Brahma Vidya comes, We recognize that the names and forms, as different as they are, all belong to this one reality, Ishvaraha. Therefore, we start to live differently according to that understanding. Having this answered by Krishna, we move on to the next section, which was verse 8 to 10. Very short. 3 types of food. Refuse to overeat. In other words, the stomach should be 1/3 empty. Once having eaten, the body an hour later or so should not feel tired. Furthermore, we said we can keep a track of what foods make us energized, what foods bring us cheer, what foods bring us a sharpness, state of mind. It has a direct impact on our mental state of mind. For this reason, the food is important. Verse 11 to 13, we talked about 3 types of yajna. This is devotion or worship. Very simple. Anything that is sattvic is always oriented towards activities of self-growth. Rajaguna is oriented towards external growth, and Tamaguna is oriented towards hurt or violence. Verse 14 to 19, 3 types of tapas. In other words, spiritual practices. And we said there are 2 definitions of tapas. The first definition is willful self-denial. That means willfully saying no once in a while. That means the power of decision is in your hands. Therefore, this decision is exercised. One says, no, I will not sleep. I will not close my eyes. Why not? Because I will take on a beginner's mind, as if I'm listening to this for the first time in my life. This is a beginner's mind. The second definition of tapas is adopting a greater sense of self-discipline in life through a spiritual practice. And this is for the sake of, we said last week, reviving that primary relationship with the Lord. Therefore, 2 definitions of tapas have been stated. How do we implement this tapas? Because tapas means spiritual practice. And while chapter 17 does not give any spiritual practices, I will give you 5 now. They are from easy to hard. Prarthana, which is prayer. It involves simply asking the Lord for something that you want, something that you could have more of, or the removal of some condition that is an obstruction to your peace. Furthermore, the logic of prayer, why it works, is every time we redirect our minds to the Lord, we are, by the virtue of association, calling for the Lord's qualities. In other words, we are asking the Lord's qualities to inhere in our minds. And most importantly, in the universe of cause and effect, no action ever goes wasted. It simply has to bring some kind of punyam. In this case, a prayer cannot possibly bring any papam. It has to bring punyam. However little, it is still punyam nevertheless, because it is an action. This is the law of the universe. This is how it works. The second is association to the virtuous. In other words, satsanga. Human beings being ones who learn through example and through association and through inspiration. One session with the wise can do more for the individual than 10 years of solo study. This is a fact, because then in real life, you see they're just a human being, and this alone gives you reassurance. They're not as high as I thought they were. In other words, real life contact reestablishes and puts you back to what we call Ishvara Srishti. You see, they're just an ordinary human being like myself, with thoughts and feelings, with opinions and such. Especially when we see behind the scenes and their real life, how they live, how they eat, how they move. This can be very reassuring because it makes you recognize this is all there is to it. There is nothing special out there. There's no special being out there who is doing things magically or differently than you are already. The third is what's called sankalpa, cultivating deliberately one wise attitude. One quality that you think would incorporate all the other qualities in themselves. For example, in chapter 13, value 13, asaktihi, absence of sense of ownership. Suppose that you want to reduce that sense of ownership. One way to do that would be to convert the way we use our words, because we said last week, our words are closely interlinked with the buddhi. We cannot think our vak without the buddhi. But since the buddhi is so abstract, we look at our vak. How we speak is how our vak thinks. Therefore, by changing the vak, we are literally changing the buddhi, the intellect. How so? Instead of saying, this is my fortune, change that and say, this is Bhagavan's blessing. One simple shift in the words or removes that sense of mamakara. In reality, nothing is yours, as we have seen before. The air you're breathing, you did not create. The dear trees are creating it for us. So are the oceans. Therefore, sankalpa, deliberately cultivating one virtue for the next 20 or so days, incorporating it in your conversations at work and with clients and so on, through the words, especially, or through actions. Maybe it is a gentler hug, a gentler hold. Maybe you're holding their hands a little bit, reassuring them, thinking for them, thinking well for them. Okay. The next one is Pratipaksha Bhavana. This has been stated in chapter 13, Pratipaksha Bhavana. This is converting immediately any criticism into a praise. The mind's tendency since the beginning of this life, at least, has been to find errors, to find flaws in things. We can find 20 flaws about anyone in less than 3 minutes. And yet, in those 3 minutes, how many praises can we come up with? By the time we come up to the 5th praise, after 5 becomes difficult. And yet we are still going on with 2nd page we need for criticism. This has been due to the society that we've grown up in, how we've been trained in overall. And so we have to break this deliberately by immediately finding or at least 2 positives for every negative. Suppose that one says that Australia has no real culture, then one can immediately negate that and say, actually, Australia's culture is a platform that lets other cultures flourish wonderfully. In other words, we're always finding something deliberately well about our nation, our family, our kids, our own state of mind, and our capacities. Therefore, we ask ourselves, what is it that I am excellent at creating negatives about? What is it? Is it yourself? Is it your parents? Is it someone close to you? Is it your work? Whatever you could write the most negatives about, that is something to practice Pratipaksha Bhavana and create at least 5 positives about. As I said, this is one of the hardest things to get out of, this narrative of negativity. Finally, the hardest one is emotional management. Emotions are an expression of what you know. In other words, of your knowledge. And your knowledge is a product of samskaras. That means the unconscious tendencies to make us think in a certain way. Therefore, while it is impossible to detect what is inside the unconscious mind, even though there are books written about this, accessing the subconscious mind, it is impossible to do that unless there's an emotional reaction that's happening or occurring right now. So that emotional reaction is your direct window into the causal body, into the unconscious mind. And that very moment of reaction is the absolute best moment out of all for reframing that emotion that has the flavor of negative connotation. Therefore, do not try to seek for problems in the unconscious. It is impossible. We can only see through the window of the unconscious through our emotional reactions, which means they are a blessing. They are the greatest blessing for direct and immediate transformation and reframing using Pratipaksha Bhavana of that situation which has triggered us to experience that emotion. These 5 have been stated, and therefore we can continue on to verse 20 to 22. 3 types of charity or giving. I will first give us an intro and then proceed onto the verses. What is charity? Charity, or danam, is not only monetary gift or monetary giving from compassion, from empathy. It is also giving your love, giving your understanding, giving your smile, giving your precious gifts that the world is starved of. Because every jiva has, at the time of birth, been given a special, unique signature. And this signature is something that no one else has. You may be very good at soothing people's emotional loads. Therefore, that skill is to be given. Someone else may be good at giving knowledge. Therefore, they use that gift to give to the world. So it can be knowledge, it can be your love, it can be your smile, your understanding, your compassion. All of these beautiful qualities that the world could enjoy, could have some. In other words, we give this in our small circle of influence. It could be within our context of our family or the context of our work. A helping hand, in summary, is giving. Giving also is one of the fastest ways to negate the ill effects of our past actions. That means papam. Every individual has papam to play out. We don't know it now, but it will come. It will come in some sort of maybe physical sickness or emotional outburst or some kind of a challenge in life. And this papam can be negated, or at least partially negated, through giving, danam. So it is a form of a prayashchitta karma, danam. This is the essence of giving. What is the significance of danam in the scriptures? And why do scriptures give such huge significance to giving, in the Vedic culture at least? There is a reason for this. Owing to ignorance, as we started out this session, every individual who is born is believing to be separate. This is the nature of all individuals. I am a separate individual from all human beings, from this world, from this universe, one name and form different from all others. This assumption creates 2 false assumptions. The first is, I am insecure. This is the common narrative in all human minds, irrespective of creed, race, or culture. I am insecure even though the nature of myself and the universe are actually not 2. They are one and the same. And yet I am insecure. This is the first assumption, owing to ignorance, which gives rise to a sense of separation. The second is, and therefore, because I am insecure, I have to gain security from this world in which I, the separate individual, am born. When in reality, this very world itself has no security whatsoever. Because by definition, security means that which will always remain in the same quantity, in the same ratio, in the same state. And yet in this world, we cannot find one thing that remains in such qualities of sameness. And the individual then makes a further conclusion. Because of these 2, I have to gain things. In other words, it gives rise to lobha. So moha, delusion, gives rise to lobha, greed. In other words, I have to go out into the world and get things so that my security can be alleviated, can be lifted, at least temporarily. In fact, there is a game called Mokshapatam or Parampadam. This is a game of the rishis who have comprised this game, which includes several blocks, 72 blocks. There are different versions, and it will give you a wonderful order of what happens when the jiva falls from the top, from Ishvara into first Janma. And the moment you go into Janma, the individual, it says, don't stay at Janma, go straight on to block 6, Moha. Now, what is between Janma, birth, and delusion? Block number 2 is Maya. So in other words, Maya, avarana shakti, veiling power, gives presence to this delusion. And then right after Maya comes krodha, anger, lobha, greed, bhuloka. This is block number 5. What is bhuloka? This is earth. In other words, one needs to be born on earth in order to experience anger, to experience greed. And right after bhuloka, moha, delusion. In other words, to be born, the individual already comes with the spell of Maya, anger, greed, and therefore one is deluded. Or owing to these principles, one is deluded. One is born deluded. And because this is so, one has the need to gain security from the world. The question is now, how does Dhanam lift this up? How does Dhanam help to alleviate these two conditions, these two assumptions? Firstly, Dhanam brings the individual back to Ishvara Srishtihi. What is Ishvara Srishtihi? The natural order that knows nothing other than to give. The nature of Ishvara Srishti is to let go, let go, let go. And because it lets go, the world is able to flourish. Bhagavan does not say, oh, she looks really beautiful. I'm going to keep her and I'm going to keep her non-aging. I don't want her to change because she looks so pretty. So I want her to stay the same. If that happened, that person, that jiva could not grow. It is, a husband may say that, but a Ishvara Srishti's order does not do that. Ishvara Srishti lets all things flourish. How so? By letting go their present state of condition. Their present state is enjoyed for only a moment and then let go until a new moment is able to arise for the sake of the evolution of that individual entity. And that moment is also let go. A next moment arises. Therefore, the individual, through Dhanam, through giving, reestablishes oneself back into Ishvara Srishtihi. And what is Ishvara Srishtihi? That order which knows nothing other than to let go. Because through letting go, one is able to flourish further. It is only the jiva who says, I want to hold on to what I have because I am attached to it for the sake of security, owing to moha, delusion, and that's going to give me a little bit of security. Ironically, it does not give any security. It only creates further fear because the individual has a need to maintain it in the future. Firstly, Ishvara Srishtihi, and second, it removes that sense of mamakara, that sense of it is mine. This is mine. I need to hold on to it. Therefore, giving Dhanam for this purpose, for these two reasons, has a powerful effect of negating the primary psychological flaw, psychological condition that arises right from childhood that gives rise to all of the other psychological tendencies as the individual grows and goes through life. All psychological conditions can be attributed to this one basic principle. I am born separate. Because I am born separate, I need security. In fact, when we go to the therapist, we always talk about things, right? Things of, I need those things. Those things are not complying to my needs. Those things are rejecting me. Those things are not good enough. It is always about things. This is owing to this moha. Chanting verse 20. Datavyam iti yaddanam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha taddanam satvikam smritam.
A charity which is given with an attitude that giving is a duty to a person who may not reciprocate, and which is given at the proper place, at the proper time, and to a proper person, is considered to be Satwik Charity.
So what does Satwik Charity look like? This is the best kind of charity, the best kind of giving that an individual can utilize. Gives out of consideration for others' well-being. In other words, why are you giving? I'm simply giving because I have enough clarity to see it is for their well-being. They may not see it, but I see it. It is also given for a noble cause. So someone may perhaps be designing a school for children, a different kind of education, a different kind of school. And you say, this is a noble cause. I believe in this. I'm going to give my monetary input. It has the individual an innocent need to help. Have you ever felt that? An innocent need to help. It's like, why are you helping? I don't know. I just have an innocent need to contribute. I don't need to give you a reason, don't need to quantify it, don't need to give you some rationale. An innocent need to help because it makes me feel good. And it certainly benefits the individual. This is Satwik giving. It is also given out of duty. This is, again, different form of innocent need to help, but it is more duty oriented. Don't need to give you a reason why, it is just a duty. I see this is important. It is doing well for the community. It is my duty to give because I have the necessary resources. And for that reason, I'm going to give. They also give out of sheer joy of giving. Sheer joy of giving. You know, a mom does not give out of some agenda. She gives out of sheer joy of giving to her children. This is Satwik giving. They are also grateful, most importantly, to give. Often we just give and we expect a thank you from the other. However, if you think about it, you need the other to experience that innocent, sheer joy of giving. Therefore, even the giver, to give you the knowledge, to give you the support, I'm actually thankful to you because without you, what is there to give? What is there to experience? So keep this in mind, please. Whenever giving, you're the one that is thankful for giving. They also give to the deserving person and at the right time. This is important. If you do not know the institution to which you're giving, it is okay to reject that. There are institutions online which you can research if you want to give through those means, and you can see their track record, their reviews. Give like that. If someone on the street asks you for something, if you do not quite feel that they will use it for the best intentions, you have every right to reject it and not feel any guilt whatsoever. It is not papam on your side, by the way, because through your intellect, you have assessed this is not right or not safe to give. They also give at the right time. It is easy to give anytime, but you have to be careful. Is it the best time to give right now, or should I give tomorrow? Because there is the person's state of mind. Are they in the mood of receptivity? Are they in the mood of appreciation? Are you in the mood of appreciation? Is it just a kind of a tick? Let me just give, move on. Or you are looking at it from a holistic standpoint. Let me give when it is just the right time, according to that relationship that you have with that person. A mistake how not to give is a family business owner will give to their other family business owner just because they are family. Do they really deserve to continue the business? That is the question. That could be a possibility to ask at least. You know, just because he's my son, just because he's my brother, does not mean that I will give the business to them, for example. Same thing with inheritance, parents. The parents will sometimes just give 50-50 to both. But the question is there really a factor of deserving for both 50-50? That is also something to consider. It is a tricky topic, but one has the right to give more to one side and give less to the other side, depending on your assessment of who has genuinely contributed and cared for the family. Of course, if it's overseas and they're unable to help, that is a different story. But we're talking about simply not willing to be involved, not willing to help, even though they're in the same city. Then is it really fair to tell them, even though you were not there for us, you still deserve 50%? Is it really fair to tell the person to train them like this? In other words, it trains them. I get the equal share for being lazy as my other sibling who worked hard. This is unfair in every way possible. Therefore, it is the parent's duty to correctly offload the right amount of income upon their departure. Giving knowledge to an unqualified person will ensue into a misuse of that knowledge. This is, again, a danger point. Therefore, before giving knowledge, your knowledge to someone, you have to first assess, are they qualified? Are they cuckoo? A cuckoo person will take the knowledge and they will turn it into a dangerous weapon. They will weaponize it. This happens in politics today. You know, even religion is weaponized today. It's not just about giving, it's giving at the right time to the right person. Verse 21. This is Rajasic giving. Yatu pratyupakarartham palam uddishyava punaha diyate chapariklishtam taddanam rajasam smritam.
That charity which is reluctantly given for the sake of something in return or expecting a result is considered to be Rajasic.
What does Rajasic charity look like? It is a means to an end. Simple as that. I'm giving you for the sake of receiving something in the future, or to be recognized as the one who gives. This is dangerous because it feeds on the ahamkara, the mamakara, the my wealth. I have wealth and I'm able to give wealth, and look at me, the one who has made it in this world. This is all that narrative of separation talking, which we discussed early on. What's really interesting here is that even if you do give something and you're forced to give it, the way the punya papam system works is next life, that's still going to incur punyam onto the individual. So even if Mr. XYZ gives and they promote their giving, like, hey, I'm giving millions of dollars away. Look at me, I've done it. Even that will serve the individual good. That will give them punyam, which next life will cause them to be born in a better family, which will help them to come out of this cycle of misfortune. Whereas if one doesn't give at all, then what happens next life? There's no punyam at all. Therefore, the birth rate gets born in a much lesser privileged family with survival oriented. And when there's survival, what happens? Compassion goes away. Dharma goes away. Where there is survival high, dharma is low. Therefore, it's much harder to come out of this cycle of misfortune next life, which is why whether it is even Rajasic giving, it's still good. They will give reluctantly and they will feel miserable after giving. Why is this so? Because Rajaguna is emotional based. In other words, it is impulsive. It was based on something shallow. It wasn't a principle of giving. It was more of an emotional satisfaction. So out of that emotional satisfaction, a person gives, but emotions are so short lasting. Therefore, the person experiences a sense of regret or remorse after they have given. So this is a red flag. If you give something, whatever it is, afterwards, if you don't feel good, there can be only one other option. I feel remorseful. I feel regretful. I regret giving. I gave too much. I gave too little. It's often maybe too much. I should have not given. I should have given to someone better. This means at the time of giving, it was a Raja Guna oriented giving. In other words, the giving was lacking buddhi. It was lacking thoughtfulness. It was impulsive. So it is not the fault of the individual receiving too much, whatever it is, money. It was the fault of the giver for not being thoughtful at the time of giving. They will keep track of what they give. This is not really giving, is it? Let me put an Excel spreadsheet. I gave so much money to you. I gave so much. I came to your house so many times, and so now you must match that number. This is a game for kids. It's not real giving. And they will talk about it a lot. I gave. They will give little, but they will talk about it a lot. One time I gave this much money, and no one else was giving, but I was the only one there to give. So it becomes another story for the ahamkara. Verse 22, tamasic giving, adesha kale yadanam apatre bhyashchadiyate asat kritam avatnyatam tadtamasam udahritam.
That charity which is given at the wrong place and time to unworthy people without honoring and with contempt is said to be tamasic.
Ignoble causes. Suppose there is across the road, an institution that, well, this is very hard to find in the Western world, but it is there nevertheless. Anyone that is doing a disservice to the society, if I give to them, that is called tamasic giving. That means it is going to support the illegal substances. It's going to support the illegal activity, and it's going to damage in the long term the society. It's going to bring a burden onto the society by feeding it more support and feeding it more monetary input, like terrorist scams. Hackers get paid to hack into the Australian Parliament, into the USA Army. They actually get paid for this. So this is tamasic form of giving. They will give away the useless and the unusable. For example, giving warm clothes to the kids in the tropics. Is this useful? No, it's not. The kids in the tropics need something thinner. So in other words, they don't consider whether this is appropriate giving or not. And they will look down upon the receiver. You see, the receiver who is asking something from you, they're already feeling small. So it does not do a favor to make them even smaller. Guaranteed they're already feeling smaller. Even if they're forced, if it's forced labor, they are already feeling disempowered and they actually don't want to do that. Even if it's prostitution, there is a factor in them, a voice that says, I do not want to do this. This is dirty. So therefore, never look down on the receiver, no matter who they are, because they are already going through a hard time. They're trying to get out of that, and they just find themselves in a cycle, which is very hard to get out of, except to continue providing a dirty form of service, whether it's hacking, whether it is terrorist or any kind of dirty service that is there. Therefore, the tamasic giver will look down upon the receiver. This is tamasic giving. Okay, so these are the 3 types of dhanam, 3 types of charity, uplifting the energy back up to sattva guna. A takeaway here is when you give, it is given for noble causes. It gives you joy to give. The person that you give to, you believe in them. Whether it is an institution or the person, you believe in them. You stand for them. And you would give to them over and over and over again because it makes you pleased to give them. And you know they're doing a best service from what they are receiving. This is the art of giving. The giving should always make you feel good about yourself and should always benefit the receiver. This is the rule of Satwik giving. That's all we need to know. Verse 23 to 28, we will finish today. The significance of Om Tatsat and then the conclusion. Om Tatsaditi nirdeshaha brahmanas trividhas smrtaha brahmanastena vedascha yajñascha vihitav pura.
Om Tatsat is considered to be the threefold designation of Brahman. By uttering this, the Brahmins, the Vedas, and the Yajnas were created long ago.
The power of God's name has, through the centuries, moved people from the darkest regions into the light. The power of God's name in the language, in the culture that the person was born in, has that power to uplift the individual, to give them some sense of hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And while there are thousands of names for God, Krishna, in the context of 23 to 28, will give the name of God Om Tatsat. So what is Om Tatsat? It is the name of God. And Krishna wants to give 5 points here, and I will give these 5 points in verse 23. That way we can just chant the rest of the verses without having to explain them. So I will give the whole teaching in verse 23. The first point is Om Tatsat, which is the name of God, consists of 3 names. The first is Om. It comes from the root Av. Av means to guard, to maintain, or to protect. In other words, Om is the protector of the world. Otherwise, the non-negatable truth, Sat Chit. Either of these, Om stands for. Tat stands for all knowledge power, which has given you this body, using which, if used appropriately, according to the laws and orders, as governed by all knowledge, all power, you, the individual, can know yourself to be not different from this very all knowledge, all power. Again, Tat stands for all knowledge, all power. This is Ishvara. Tat stands for Ishvara. Ishvara is all knowledge, all power, which has given you this very body, which you are writing this down with this message. If used properly, if this body is used properly, and this mind, that very individual can discover one's truth to be not different from this very all knowledge, all power. And this is what we call moksha. Om Tat Sat. Sat is given 5 different definitions. Throughout the scriptures, Sat is used all over. Sat, 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 Sat. We will get all the definitions for Sat now. 3 of them will be in verse 26. 2 of them will be in verse 27. The first definition of Sat is the existence or the content from which all names and forms borrow their existence. In other words, the one existence, the one content from which all names and forms borrow their individual existences. We used the example before of the clay pot. The clay inheres through and through all pots, all pottenware. A fork made out of clay, a pot made out of clay, a spoon made out of clay. It is all clay. It is all one content, but the name and forms are different. As I use the example on the board, A, B, C, D, they all share the one ink. Therefore, the first definition is Sat, the one existence, the one content. The next one is the goodness, in other words, the Dharma, which makes actions good. The Dharma inherent throughout the universe, which makes actions by nature beneficial for the doer. What do I mean by this? Suppose you take a food, simple action. The food helps you to survive, right? Suppose you go to sleep, close your eyes, and then what happens? You sleep, and then the body gets revived. That very action, that very goodness inherent in the act of sleeping, which is beneficial for your body, that is Sat definition number 2. Definition number 3, it is the goodness or the Dharma that makes all actions in the individual good. In other words, everyone gets born with Dharma. It is an inherent program in all sentient beings. This inherent program, if covered, it distorts itself into what we call adharma. But Dharma, the goodness in all beings, is definition number 3 of Sat. So definition number 1, existence or the content inhering through and through all names and forms. Definition number 2, the goodness or the Dharma that makes an action beneficial to living beings. To living beings to copulate, that in itself is an action that helps the living beings survive. That is Sat. Third definition, the Dharma that is inherent in all human beings by birth. If they don't look good, if they look naughty, it is not because there's no Dharma. It is because there are some distortions, there are some coverings of past life, Purva Janma distortions, carryovers, samskaras. That was all from verse 26. Verse 27, the third definition is the commitment that you have for yajna, tapas, and dhanam. Just think about that commitment. What is it that makes you want to commit to your self-growth? That very commitment that makes you want to stick, that is because of Sat. That is the fourth definition of Sat. I want to worship. I want to give. I want to do a spiritual practice. Why? Because Sat inheres through and through that very individual you. Therefore, you can't help yourself, because we said the first definition of Sat is existence, which inheres through and through all names and forms. This is why we find ourselves helplessly wanting to do good, wanting to commit to yajna, to worship, to spiritual practice, to charity. Verse 27, the second definition, the fifth definition of Sat is any other activity that promotes yajna, tapas, or dhanam, any other activity. For example, suppose you're working with a client, aged care home, working with older people, and you just see them weak, they don't have the strength, and you find yourself having empathy for this, like, wow, this touches me, I want to help them. And this leads you to think about worship. That link between something that is seemingly unrelated, that link is Sat. Working with older people, you see the weakness and you want to help them. You can't help yourself. And this, when you go home, makes you think of God, of higher existence. That is because of that link called Sat. Flood relief. You see individuals who are stranded, floods, and you want to help them. and you go over and you help the individual. Maybe you inflate a little boat they just happen to have inside your pockets, and you bring them over safely, and they hug you. They are so grateful, and you're touched by this. You never thought that someone would be crying and be so grateful for saving their life, which was not a big deal for you, but for them it was a huge deal. You go home and you're so touched by this, you go and start to worship the Lord. That link is Sat. All 5 definitions of Sat have been expounded. This is the first point that Krishna makes. The second point is Brahmaji himself, the creator of the universe, used this mantra, Om Tatsat, to create the universe. I know you're going to pose a million questions based on this. So what? There was a being with a big mouth saying Om Tatsat, and the whole universe came. Krishna is stating this. And just like the telephone creator, did you know the first words when a telephone was allegedly created was hello? First words came out of the creator of the telephone. And therefore, hello became the convention in the world. The first thing when someone dials, we say hello. Same thing. Because Brahmaji's first mantra for the creation of the universe was Om Tatsat, throughout the Vedas, either Om, either Tat, either Sat, or Om Tatsat, all 3 are used at the end of a mantra. Om Tatsat iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita su. In other words, at the end of every chapter of the Gita, we say Om Tatsat. So Om Tatsat became the convention of the devotees to chant for the sake of worship. Point 4 that Krishna wants to make is the power of this mantra has the transformative effect of converting tamaguna tendencies into rajaguna tendencies and elevating them to the sattva guna tendencies. So it is a mantra that through its infusion of, you could call it energy, is powerful enough to help you to transform lower into higher tendencies, lower tamasic into higher sattvic tendencies. Point 5 that Krishna wants to make is when this mantra was chanted, Om Tatsat, 3 orders had to be incorporated into creation for the help, for the sake of survival of the universe and all living beings. And these 3 orders were Yajna, Veda, and Brahmana. The word Yajna in this case does not mean worship or devotion. It has a different context. So again, as this mantra was chanted, Om Tatsat, 3 orders had to be incorporated, without which the universe could not survive. And what are these 3 orders? The first is Yajna. Yajna means the right conduct, living which the harmony of the universe is sustained. Without this conduct, harmony or a sense of continuity is not possible. In other words, the proper conduct through which the living beings can live. Living beings don't just go out there punching each other randomly. There has to be a big reason for that. Living beings have a natural respect for each other. Why is that? Because of Yajna. It's incorporated throughout creation. Not only living beings, but also species. Our ancestors, smallest of the smallest amoeba, germ, bacteria, fish, dinosaur. Out of all of that evolutionary perspective came the human being, came a Neanderthal, Homo sapien, evolved slowly into a human being. Throughout all of that, this yajna was there for the sake of helping those species, whichever forms they took, to not eat each other, to not kill each other, to sustain each other in harmony. You see this throughout nature. There is sustenance, there is harmony. This is yajna. The second is Veda. Veda is the means by which yajna can come out. Veda is the knowledge which brings out the presence and the right conduct, which is the yajna. In other words, the Veda sustains the yajna, and the yajna sustains the Veda. In other words, the Veda promotes the yajna, and the yajna sustains the Veda. How are you supposed to know about yajna, the principle of right conduct, unless it is brought out from the creator himself? Otherwise, the human being will butcher it up. they will make a mess out of it. They will start to reinterpret reality. They will say, this is the best way to live. Men should be on top, women should be on the bottom. All these distortions are from the men's mind of not being in touch with the Veda, which reveals the right conduct, which is called yajna. But that is not enough. You still need a proper, clear mind to bring out the Veda. And therefore, at the time of creation, a Brahmana had to also be incorporated. What is a Brahmana? Brahmana is, irrespective of creed, gender, race, culture, anyone with a clear mind who brings out the word of God through the means of Veda for the sake of teaching the society how to adhere, how to comply with yajna. Otherwise, the society destroys itself. If a common man takes the Veda, they will butcher it up. They will misinterpret it. They will put it according to their likes and dislikes. It's not going to work. So we need some person who will preserve this scripture in the clear light that it is originally, and then teach it to the masses so that the masses should not destroy themselves. Because, why is this important? Without a human self-conscious being, there is no purpose for creation. We've discussed this sometime previously. The only purpose for creation is why? For the sake of a self-conscious human being. You don't need creation for ants. A creation doesn't need to sustain itself for tigers and antelopes and monkeys and gorillas and chimps and dolphins and so on. You don't need creation for that. Otherwise, it is a mundane existence, doing the same thing: survival, replicate, and die and sleep. What is the purpose of creation if it's just those four? Therefore, the only reason creation is here is for the self-conscious human being. In other words, the trajectory of all of the species are to arrive to a self-conscious human being. This is what we call evolution, so that that human being can eventually get out of this cycle of this mundane existence of mere replicate, survive, sleep, and eat. So these three had to be there for the sake of preserving the harmony, preserving the purpose of the universe. The Brahmana promotes the Veda promotes the Yajna, and the Yajna not only sustains the Brahmana and the Veda, but sustains the entire human race, and the human race, self-conscious human beings, sustain the entire universe. So line 1 of verse 23, by chanting Om Tatsat, the three orders were created: Yajna, Veda, and Brahmana. And this will conclude our chapter 17. Let's now chant all of these verses from 24 to 27. I will go. Tasmad omit yudahritya yajnadana tapah kriyaha pravartante vidhanoktaha satatam brahmavadinam tadityanabhisandhaya palam yajnatapah kriyaha dana kriyascha vividhaha kriyante mokshakankshibhihi sadbhave sadhubhave cha saditye tat prayujyate prashaste karmani tatha satchabdhav partha yujyate yajne tapasidane cha stitiv saditi chochyate karma chaiva tadarthiyam sadityeva bhidhiyate.
Therefore, for those who are well versed in the Vedas, the activities in the form of yajnas, charities and austerities which are mentioned by scriptural injunctions take place after the utterance of Om. After uttering the word Tat, various activities in the form of yajnas, austerities and charities are undertaken by the seekers of liberation without expecting the result. The word Sat is used in the sense of existence and goodness. Further, the word Sat is used in the sense of good actions, O Arjuna. Steadfastness in yajna, austerity, and charity is also termed as Sat. Again, any action for the sake of the Lord is indeed said to be Sat.
And I will chant the last verse. Ashraddhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayata asadit yuchyate partha nachattat pretya no iha.
Whatever is offered as oblation, given as charity, practiced as austerity, and done as worship without faith is said to be asat. It fructifies neither here nor hereafter, O Arjuna.
And this is just verse 28 is a little warning from Krishna. In other words, never undertake any form of charity, any form of giving, any form of worship, any form of worldly activity, unless it is done with total sincerity and faith. In other words, if it's done without sincerity and faith, it's called asat karma, but which has a greater proportion of papam than punyam. In other words, if anything is done without sincerity or faith, even if it looks good on the outside, it actually incurs you more papam than punyam. And so Bhagavan is urging us to convert all of these insincere forms of activities, convert them from the lower into higher, into sincere. So we ask ourselves, am I being sincere in my giving, in my worship, in my charity? If yes, then Bhagavan is happy, which is all he is asking us to do. Om Tatsat iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Sambade Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yogo Nama Saptadasho Dhyayaha. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.